Welcome to Module M. Module M, modern golf designers. Particularly, we're going to talk about Pete Dye. And Pete Dye comes on the scene after Robert Trent Jones. Pete Dye had been an insurance salesman, a pretty good golfer in Indiana, and his wife was a good golfer too, and he had an interesting way of selling insurance. He played golf all summer long, wouldn't talk about insurance at all, and then he called everybody up that he played golf with and sold insurance to them. So he was a pretty good salesman, but he decided he was going to build golf courses. So he bought himself a bulldozer and dumped a load of sand in his front yard and played around with it. And after John Daly and Crooked Stick, the rest of the story is pretty interesting. I like Pete Dye to my patron saint because he came on the scene when Robert Trent Jones was doing these big, massive things. Like when I came to Sandhills, Fred Garrett had built the landscape garden and all these great things. And Pete Dye said to himself, well, how can I compete with that? I can't build these great big golf courses, so let's build tiny little golf courses. So I said, how can I compete with the garden? Let's just not have anything at all. So our guys all work on golf courses, and that's worked for us. And a completely different outside-the-box strategy has worked for Pete Dye for his career, and he has recently been inducted into the Golf Hall of Fame, one of only a few handful of architects that have received that honor. Pete Dye has a book, Bury Me in a Pop Bunker. It's not without precedent. This is a bunker at Harbour Town golf links in Hilton Head, behind the green, and those are very small bunker, but very, very prevalent in the golfer's eye and difficult. Dye had a belief that true nature is characterized by abrupt changes. You can see these changes, particularly with the railroad ties stuff. Lots of railroad ties, hard edges. The ball's either on the green or off the green. There's not a lot of gray area on a Pete Dye golf course. One of the most famous, the Cape hole, finishing hole that he's used at lots of his golf courses. This is Harbour Town. Pretty famous. The Heritage is played there every year in the spring. We've had interns there. This is Mr. Britt, and you can see looking through. So he's at near the clubhouse, and you can look through and see the lighthouse through there. So there is a little bit of walking at this golf course, and it is very different from a lot of your normal rolling Ross golf courses or even a Robert Trent Jones. Maintenance is intense there. There's a lot of rounds here. These guys are working while golf is going on. But very white sand, and a lot of time and effort is spent on that. Actually, there's some C-sharp paspalum up in here that has gotten to the estuaries, and we'll talk about that a little bit in Turf 1 for you turfgrass students. So this is a very unique golf course in that it's one of Pete Dye's first golf courses, and he works with Jack Nicklaus. So in 1969, the height of Robert Trent Jones, they decided they're going to do something different. And this is a really interesting quote because you think about Pebble Beach East, Pine Valley South, and St. Andrews with Spanish Moss. These three golf courses are nothing alike, yet Harbour Town has elements of both. It's a very difficult place to grow grass. In fact, they probably sod more than any other golf course in the country. Giant live oaks. Really the only open hole is that 18th. It's the famous Cape. But the other holes really require incredible shot making, and it's a place where Davis Love has been very successful because of that. Lots of railroad ties. Hitting the greens where you're either on or off. So very penal target style golf. Balls in the air. You can see the routing. 18 is the classic Cape with the ocean out here. 17 is a pretty famous par 3 hole, pretty classic in a lot of his designs. One of the largest houses I've ever seen. There's a massive tree in this 16th fairway where you have to either play here or here, and you can just see the massive amount of trees on this golf course. So it's very, very difficult and then you pop out onto the ocean for the last hole. Here's a look at some of the trees. Lots of Spanish moss. Lots of handwork underneath for these shells where players play their shots. Some of the comments from the pros when this in the 60s. Jack Nicklaus, the architect, said he gets angrier here than anywhere else he plays. Lots of different shots, and I think Dave Marr, he said, placing the fairways are in some strange places. So Pete Dye did some interesting stuff here and made a name for himself that has carried on to this day. Here's the 9th hole. You come back to the clubhouse. Very dramatic. And again, these pop bunkers that play right in behind that 9th hole. So again, lots of shade problems, lots of shade issues on this golf course, and deeper bunkers. So trying to bring a little bit of the extreme Scottish design to the United States. On the golf course, here's that 17th. Out into the marsh. The birthplace of American golf, the Masons golf course in 1786 that we talked about. So they've grabbed onto the heritage title, and it's a pretty long running tournament. Short, difficult, tight par threes. There's also in Wilmington, the Landings. Or Landfall Club, has similar railroad ties, and this is some construction that they've done there. Pete chose to use centipede grass in the rough here, and they've been through a lot of superintendents, and some have had more success than others. In fact, there were so many railroad ties used in the 70s that he decided to stop using them in the 80s and started to try to use some other things to build these golf courses. Here's that centipede grass I was talking about, and it looks like a little chlorotic, and they had some trouble keeping it green. But Pete Dye really liked the texture difference. So you're either on the fairway or in the rough, and when you're in the rough, you're going to get a dramatically different texture and feel, and centipede provided that for him. Pete Dye is a very hands-on architect. At Kiowa, they have drawings of all the golf courses done by the architect, except the ocean course, because Pete Dye doesn't do drawings. He does his work by hand. Actually, Rich Mandel did the drawings that are in the clubhouse in Kiowa for the ocean course. So TPC Sawgrass, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this golf course. I did a visit there last year. Now, these spectator mounds are completely gone. You can see, anybody that's worked on a golf course can see what a nightmare those would be, and it turns out that a smooth hill is much easier to mow, and more spectators can be on that. So they took the idea of Augusta being a spectator golf course to an extreme. Every golf hole has mounds, no uphill or blind shots, no elevated greens, 50,000 people being able to view the 18. So as the golf tournament moves through, as the final group gets to 18, everybody can stick around and see the final putt drop. That was the idea that Dan Beeman had, and it worked very well for the PGA Tour and for lots of the golfers who teamed with lesser architects and built these TPC golf courses all over the country. Sawgrass is called Pine Valley with palm trees, and that's probably somewhat correct. This golf course is one of the last golf courses to be pulled out of the muck, and that was one of the things that they fixed in the recent construction, that this muck that had been pulled out and then fertilized Bermuda grass on top of it had created a soft, mushy fairway that was not difficult enough for the pros. The ball wasn't rolling. So by stripping that off and putting sand, they've built a golf course that has brought roll back to the golf course. Here's a picture of the golf course. You can see the routing. if you want to study that. Whereas here is 17. I'm going to show you quite a lot of pictures of 17. Pretty much one of the most famous island greens. And then you play 18, which is the Cape, back around to the home hole. So Vijay Singh lives at this golf course, so the PGA players have a say in it. And it is still, there's lots and lots of stuff to be done here after this big construction. One of the fastest constructions ever done. In fact, they built a giant parking lot of concrete to stockpile all the sand. So all the sand was stockpiled before the golf course was closed. It was closed, and then they rebuilt all the fairways. So here's a result of that. Here's 18, up to the massive clubhouse rebuild also. But again, biting off as much as you can chew from this lake with railroad ties, and in a very sterile lake. One of the comments that I heard from the superintendent is we hire these companies now that come in to take care of the lakes, and they really nuke everything. They make sure that they're totally sterile. So unlike Country Club in North Carolina that many of you have seen that has spatter dock and fish habitat, some of these ponds managed by aquatic weeds management companies have nothing. So they're completely clear and clean, which is a look that a lot of people desire. And we're up on the hill, so this is a hill where thousands of fans can sit and watch the conclusion of the tournament. Jerry Pate was one of the first winners here. This is the famous orange ball jumping into the water. The golf course has been redone quite a few times by Pete Dye, and I'm going to talk about some of the most recent changes that they've made using data from IBM that is really incredible data about the golf course. The thing about the 17th hole is you're either on or off. It's a very penal design. The fans love it, but the players hate it. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Golfers get paid for making pars and making birdies. Big numbers take money away from them, so they really don't like the opportunity to make big numbers, and that's what this is at 17. There are people lined around, and you can just recall the horror stories of people hitting 3 and 4 balls into the water. One of the unfortunate things about this is very difficult for them to keep the tees. Everybody we watched play this hole hit 2 or 3 shots. So here it is, and you can see one of the ways that they try to keep that area fresh is they don't overseed the area where the pros will be teeing, and they also keep a mat on it. So the normal play is here. Interestingly, the green used to be a little bit smaller. The railroad ties were falling in, so they went in and they put all new railroad ties around the hole outside, then removed the inside railroad ties and filled it in. So this green has even been rebuilt a few times in the past few years. But you can see lots and lots of area for spectators, and these are the spectator mounds now. So those wooden spectator mounds have been removed. Here's some of the data I was talking to you about. You can see where everybody hit their shot. Blue shots were birdies. I think red shots were bogeys. Blacks are others, so really big numbers. So you can see exactly where people hit shots and what happened to them. And one of the things that Pete Dye decided from studying that, they made some subtle changes, especially to these roll-off areas. It used to be if your ball rolled off, it would roll off and stop, so you had an uphill lie. What they've done is they've increased the slope on this and trimmed the back of this mound. So a ball rolling off here, landing on the green and coming back, will land on the back of this mound that will have a downhill lie. So much more difficult, or a much more severe penalty for missing the greens by just a little bit. And that's one of the changes that they made to try to toughen the golf course a little bit, is they made the fairways harder and roll better. Here's the owner of Memphis Golf. This gentleman is probably one of the most knowledgeable people in golf. He started at the age of 12 picking up rocks and sticks for his father, who was working for Pete Dye when they built this golf course. So he's been involved in this golf course since its inception. good friends with George Thompson. Great place to do an internship. So Pete Dye brings in these island greens. There's something similar at Pine Valley, but really they come into vogue at 17. Here's out west, TPC West, where he used rocks. Here's Coeur d'Alene, which is a floating green. That's interesting if you want a really slow play. How about taking a boat to your ball? And then the epitome of probably over-the-top island greens, Desmond Muirhead's New Jersey hole. Jack Nicklaus, one of the first, put him on short par fours. There's PGA West. Even Reese Jones has a few in Cape May for Desmond Muirhead. And Dwayne Hagden's, he's the Coeur d'Alene designer. Here's PGA West, the 17th hole, so very similar. You play that, it's a little bit bigger green, and then again 18 is another Cape using all the rocks. So we're going to talk about Mike Strantz and Tot Hill Farms, and this is a similar look to Tot Hill Farms. And rocks are really a formidable opponent in golf because the ball really bounces around like Plinko. Here's the floating green in Idaho. So soon after this massive movement of earth out of wetlands, we get environmental regulations. And you can see a golf course construction, even on a already constructed site, can cause lots of erosion and lots of difficulty or trouble for the environment. So it is right to have these regulations. One of the things I like to tell all my students is, before the inspector comes for the first time, make sure you have 2 or 3 times as much stuff as he's going to want. Double the silt fence. Be way ahead of the game, because if he comes and sees that, you're not going to see him a lot. But if he sees things not done right, you're going to see him often, and he can shut down a job and cost your owner millions of dollars in lost revenue if the golf course has to open a year later than it was supposed to because you didn't have up enough silt fence. So the government put into place laws where if you take away an acre of wetlands, you have to put an acre back into wetlands, and now 2 acres into wetlands, and even there's now, I think it's up to 5 acres of wetlands, and a lot of those acreage can be done at other places. So you can buy wetlands that save water, and some environmental law makes it very difficult, particularly the Neuse River Basin, to build a golf course that goes over the river at all. But I like this picture because this is the same hole. This is the 13th hole at Pinehurst number 4. And this is what it looked like this summer for the U.S. Amateur. So quite a different. Kyle Braun's done a marvelous job of bringing this golf course in to be one of the premier golf courses in the area. And it really played in much better condition than Pinehurst number 2 for the U.S. Amateur. So all the players agreed that it was the best second course they had ever played on. Second course being a course they only play 2 rounds on or 1 round on before they go to the main course. Again, Target Golf was around at Pine Valley a little bit. Challenging for the skilled, defeating for the foolhardy, and miserable for the beginner. So it does have its place. I know you guys like to do that stuff, but it can definitely be overdone, particularly for beginning golfers. And there's overdone. After wetland law, lots of bridges and walkways had to be put in. Dan Maples does the Witch, which has miles and miles of bridges, $1,000 per linear foot. Elk Ridge in the northern Savannah of Michigan is a preserve for elk. Bonita Bay, huge wetland project, and then Old Marsh. So you can see a lot of this stuff that Pete Dye and these golfers have been forced to do after Harbour Town was easy. So permitting can take longer and usually does take longer than the golf course process. So the golf course architect is involved in a lot more than just laying out holes and saying where bunkers go. There's Elk River. And then here's a Muirhead type idea. Here's this golf course is owned by the Honey Baked Ham people, and there's your pig bunker. So into the 80s, we get a proliferation of TPC courses. We get Scottsdale, Hartford, Memphis, Raleigh. They all have the same construction crew. They have a different pro architect who's the name architect, and probably a different lesser architect who's designing for them. But here's an example of the TPC in Raleigh, where they now play the nationwide tour that comes there. And Hale Irwin had done this, and it was interesting because Rich Mandel was at the time designing just a driving range at CCNC, and I was trying to get Rich to play golf, and he said, "Well, I can't. I'm too busy designing this." I said, "Well, Hale Irwin's designing 3 or 4 golf courses right now, and he plays every weekend, so they do have help on their design teams, as Rich does not." And there's your Cape tee shot to that second shot coming in Raleigh. 12 touring pros had firms in 1980 at the peak of the golf course design. So we can only speculate that it won't be long, and we've already seen it in North Carolina, where Tiger Woods is starting to design some golf courses. So we've seen Singapore and the Woodlands in North Carolina have come up with the money to get this guy's name on a design. And he'll probably do a pretty good job. He's a pretty smart guy. He's a thinking golfer. He's been golfing his whole life. He'll probably design some very nice golf courses. Palmer and Nicholas aligned with different architects. Dye and Nicholas doing their first job. Palmer with Ed Sayer, they've been working for many years. There's Nicholas. There's Hale Irwin. Davis Love has done a few. Anderson Creek. I think it's interesting to have a picture of a man on your ad that has never visited the site, but his brother there, who's caddying on the bag, was really the architect for Anderson Creek right there. And then Freddie Couples has done quite a few golf courses in Atlanta. John Daly, Wicked Stick. And we say why? Well, why? Because they can attract this much attention. And that's going to be it for the first part of the Modern Lecture. We're going to come back and talk about this golf course, Desert Mountain, a place where they have 6 Jack Nicklaus 18-hole golf courses, and they rake 5 feet of desert every day. So this is probably the epitome of golf course, or the pinnacle of golf course maintenance.